Chapter 4, Lexington. People at the zoo have asked why I have the same name as the town and the zoo. I know. Lexington is an odd name for a girl, but I had nothing to identify me when Roger found me. Roger tried everything he could do to find my family, to find some clue about who I was and where I belonged, but he came up with nothing. Even the ghost couldn't help, and Roger hasn't seen her since that night. The tornado tore into the town of Lexington several miles from the zoo. The weather experts labeled it an EF5 tornado, and that means it was the fiercest kind of storm, causing incredible damage. Imagine buildings yanked from their foundations and wind throwing cars through the air. Apparently, this is the sort of wind that I survived. According to the newspaper articles and what Roger told me, the tornado tore through 30 miles of Nebraska farmland, nearly missing several farmhouses before destroying a small town called Haven Hills. Then it hit Lexington. It flattened the east section of the city, tearing up the concrete and everything. But as happens with tornadoes, even EF5 scale tornadoes, the funnel disappeared almost as quickly as it formed. It vanished before it could totally demolish the zoo. And even with an EF5, some things are unexplained, like why some buildings were left standing when everything around them was gone, and why no animals at the zoo were harmed, and why a little girl survived alone. Roger filled out a lot of paperwork when I came to live with him. He had visits from people whose job it was to be concerned about where I should live and who I should live with. He bought me new clothes and fixed a room for me in the old county bank. It was a long time ago, but I remember how people visited and scratched notes on clipboards with their pens. Roger did whatever they asked so that I could stay with him. And when it was all arranged, he had to give me a name. And since he found me at the Lexington Zoo in Lexington, Nebraska, he decided to call me Lexington. Now I agree, it's not that original. And it wasn't a problem until he took me to Lexington Elementary, and the kids realized that I was named after the school, the city, and the zoo. That didn't go well. But Roger does get points in the naming department for also giving me the name Willow. Lexington Willow. That has a rather satisfying sound. It sounds like Willow could be my last name, since we haven't still found out what that is, and Lexington can be shortened to simply Lex. I'll answer to any of it, just not to that name those kids called me at school. That was the one reason I left that place and never went back. Chapter 5, Summer Homework. Mrs. Lee is sitting at her desk typing on her computer. Her office is tidy and smells of the curried onions with a faint whiff of her vanilla lotion. A red velvety chair sits in the corner, and next to the chair is a bookshelf full of books that Mrs. Lee gives me to read. A framed photo on the bookshelf shows Mr. and Mrs. Lee all dressed up at a fancy dinner. It was a special event where Mr. Lee won an award for his time playing Cornhusker football a long time ago, which is what he did before he lived in Kenya and filmed a Discovery Channel documentary about Amboseli National Park. Mr. Lee is something of a celebrity at the zoo. On the wall behind the desk hangs a glittery tapestry of sequined Asian elephants. Mrs. Lee's mother gave her the wall hanging when she married Mr. Lee. Mrs. Lee looks up from her computer and smiles. She always seems happy to see me, and she's like that with everyone. "Did you finish the book and write your report?" "I did." I slide my double-spaced pages across the desk's smooth surface, but hold on to the soft paperback copy of The Island of the Blue Dolphins. I'm not sure why, but I'm not ready to return it to her. "So, what did you like most about this book?" Mrs. Lee asked. She glances at my report on the desk, but leaves it untouched. "You liked it, right?" "Yes." Fisher peeks around the corner of the kitchen and rolls his eyes at me through the side door of his mom's office. He's trying to make me laugh. He lets his tongue hang out of his open mouth as if to say, "Is this what you have to do for school?" Well, I think I liked how well Karana could take care of herself, even when she was alone." Mrs. Lee nods, and so I keep talking. "Yeah, she notices things about the world, about the animals, and she can make weapons, she can hunt, she can make shelter." I'd feel pretty safe if I was stuck on an island with someone like her. Very good. Mrs. Lee leans forward and looks over my paper. The clock on the wall ticks the day away while she takes longer to read it than I hoped. Fisher pokes his head around the corner again. His dark brown hair stands almost straight up at the top, yet he runs his fingers through it now like he wants it to do that. He tosses a backpack over his shoulder and points at the clock. He mouths, "I'll meet you there." "The trash, Fisher," Mrs. Lee says cheerfully over her shoulder. Fisher slumps into the kitchen. His dad gives him a long list of chores, and Mrs. Lee never forgets to remind him. Finally, Mrs. Lee sets down my paper. "This is well done, Lexington." "Thank you. You've worked hard this year. Roger and I have discussed it, and I believe you're on the right track to be ready for 7th grade material." She's about to change directions on me. The wind does that kind of thing all the time, and I know Mrs. Lee well enough to sense that it's coming. Mrs. Lee left teaching to run the education program at the zoo. She also runs the zoo's special events and the advertising, and it's here that she met Fisher's dad. She says she loves living in the zookeeper's residence and helping people understand what the Lexington Zoo does for animals and conservation, but I suspect that she secretly misses teaching. She was more than happy to oversee my homeschool at the zoo, and she takes it a little far sometimes, and I can usually predict when that's about to happen. "I have one more assignment for you," Mrs. Lee says, "and this one doesn't have a deadline, though. You can work on it through the summer." "Through the summer? But if I did well on my assignments, and I'm on track, then why—" Mrs. Lee laughs, her signature laugh that means she wants you to lighten up. "Don't worry, it's a good one, I promise." My insides are now tight and squirmy at the idea of summer homework. I want to protest. I want to argue. But the sooner Mrs. Lee gives me the details, the sooner that I get to leave to see Naya. Thomas said that he would start around 8:45, and I can't miss it. The front door latch clicks, the sound of Fisher's escape. He can thank me later for the distraction I always seem to provide for him to get out the door. Well, this is more of an opportunity than an assignment. Mrs. Lee walks around the front of her desk and leans on it, partially sitting on the edge. Her smooth hair is the same rich dark brown as Fisher's, except hers does not stick straight up. Hers lies elegantly over her shoulders, not at all frizzy like my blonde curls that can't seem to choose a direction. "I want you to determine how you are a survivor like Karana in the book. Like Karana, you lost your family in an unexpected way. Perhaps you'll find other similarities if you look for them." Now, I hadn't thought about that. Mostly, I'd thought of Karana as brave and tough and having long, beautiful hair like the picture on the cover. But it does kind of make sense. Karana's people sailed away and left her behind. She still had her brother on the island with her, but then wild dogs killed her brother, and she was left completely alone. Boats and wild dogs, tornadoes and zoo animals. Well, maybe Karana and I weren't that different. The clock on the wall dings to signal the half hour, 8:30 a.m. Well, consider how Karana is a survivor at heart. And what did that lead her to do? How did it help her? And once you know that, then decide what things you can do that apply to your life in a similar way. I nod quickly. I still have no idea how to do what she's asking me. And just as I'm wondering how she's going to know if I actually do this assignment, she says, "I'll check in with you once in a while, and you can report to me what you discover. Okay?" Now, I'll agree to anything at this point. Fisher's summer vacation has started, and elephant training is about to begin. "Okay, Mrs. Lee, I'll work on that." She stands up from the desk with a satisfied smile and tells me that I can go. I launch out of her office like a cat during 4th of July fireworks. I'm coming, Naya. Chapter 6, The Gift of Memory. "Fisher!" I call into the wind as I round the turnoff from the Lee's gravel road. It isn't very windy this morning, but even a small breath of breeze will carry my words. Fisher waves at me from the corner of the African Grasslands Maintenance Building, across the paved path and slightly down the hill. Morning in Nebraska smells like dew-moistened dirt and green plants all fat with humidity. I catch a swarm of gnats in the face as I run toward the grasslands. Nebraska bugs are the gateway to summer. "How'd you get out of there so fast?" Fisher asks. "Well, there's a trick to getting along with your mom, Fisher, one that you seriously need to learn." "Oh yeah?" he asks, folding his arms and leaning against the maintenance door. "Yeah," I say. "You got to agree with her." Fisher rolls his eyes, but he smiles his "I hit a home run" smile and knocks on the maintenance door. There's a keypad by the handle, but we don't have the code. Thomas, the elephant manager, is expecting us. "So, what did you agree to this time?" "Well, it's a weird project," I say. "It's kind of personal. She wants me to apply Island of the Blue Dolphins to my life." Fisher wrinkles his nose and shakes his head. "You should just come to school with me next year." Now it's my turn to roll my eyes. Fisher knows that I prefer to stay in the zoo, and that's not going to change, no matter how much he bugs me about school. The maintenance door opens. "All right, just in time." Thomas has his hat on backwards as usual. "I was beginning to wonder where you guys were." He's speaking more to me than to Fisher. When I was younger, I used to follow Thomas everywhere, trying to get close to the elephants. He knows how excited I am for today. "I had a little more homework," I say. "I wouldn't miss this." Thomas chuckles. He isn't tall like Roger, but he's strong. The sleeves of his khaki keeper's shirt are cuffed and stretched tight around his arms as though his muscles got in the way. He pushes the door open wider and lets us inside. We follow Thomas down the hallway toward the training gates, passing supply rooms and Thomas's office. Thomas has worked at the zoo longer than Mr. Lee, and he was the elephant manager when Naya, my Naya, came to the zoo. He's lined the hallways with photos of each member of the African elephant herd. Their names, their birth years, and the relationships they have with each other are all printed on their metal plates at the bottom of each frame. Although I have the information memorized, I read each one as I passed. Asha, estimated birth year 1989, saved from Swaziland drought in 2008, herd matriarch, mother of Zaire. Zaire, estimated birth year 2006, saved from Swaziland drought in 2008, daughter of Asha. Jazz, born 2009, acquired from Arkansas facility. Naya, born 1996, born in captivity, retired from Fen Circus with mother, Tendai. Tendai. Thomas pauses at Tendai's photograph, places his hand on the glass over her image, and says, "Hey there, girl." And then he walks out into the open barn space toward the training gates. Fisher follows him, but I linger at Tendai's photograph for a moment. The glass in the frame is covered with fingerprints, as though Thomas taps her photo every time he walks this hall. He hasn't taken her photo down after all of these years. And I'm glad, because Naya would never forget her mother, and so neither should we. Thomas did, however, update the details below Tendai's picture. Tendai, born 1979, retired from Fen Circus in 2011, mother of Naya, passed away in 2013. Tendai died in 2013, the same year as the tornado. The elephant barn is home to the best friend I have besides Fisher. She's a 24-year-old African elephant named Naya, and she took care of me the night I lost my family. Fisher is doubled back to me and shifts the backpack on his shoulder. "I wish you could have known her," Fisher says. Tendai, I mean. Fisher was 5 when Tendai died in April, 7 years ago. I showed up at the zoo a couple months later, in June. "I'm sorry that Naya misses her mother," I say, more to myself than to Fisher. "Well, maybe it's better not to have such a great memory," Fisher says. I bite my lip and don't answer him. He means well, but only someone who knows their parents who knows who their parents are would say such a thing. I'd give anything to remember mine.